Airtable or Smartsuite? This is one of the top questions we get on our YouTube channel because we've created so much content around both of these platforms. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from AutomationHelpers.com, and we've got a team of 15 consultants who are working with clients on Airtable and Smartsuite every day of the week. We feel like this positions us pretty well to be able to talk about the strengths of each of these platforms. In addition, this video is not sponsored by either of these companies because we want to give you as objective as possible a review of each of these tools. We're going to go through here category by category, and we know there's some areas that you might not care about or you might care about more than others. So we've got timestamps down below if you want to click on the sections that matter most to you, and then we've got a summary at the end. For each category, we're going to assign a rating. If it's a 3, that means that there's a significant advantage over the competitor product. If it's a 2, it's a moderate advantage over the competitor. 1 is a slight advantage, and 0 is it's mostly up to opinion. It's pretty comparable between the products. So let's jump in and talk about pricing. Now, Airtable recently went through some significant pricing changes, and we have a separate video that's dedicated to that if you want to check it out. But if you're coming in pretty cold here and you're looking at these pricing plans, in general, you're probably going to find that Smartsuite is more affordable. And there's a couple exceptions here. But you'll notice for Airtable, you're going from free up to a $20 a month plan. For Smartsuite, there are a lot of folks who were in kind of a middle tier before that's no longer available with Airtable. And the team option works pretty well if you're kind of dipping your toes into needing a more complex solution and the additional features that are available here. So this works well for a lot of people. Now, one area where Airtable might be more beneficial is if you're looking at professional and you want the 50,000 records per solution and you're paying $25 a user a month. But on Airtable, that's $5 less for those 50,000 records. Now, this isn't a full apples to apples comparison here, but it is a little bit cheaper there on Airtable. One thing I'd say about Smartsuite in this regard is that we're not quite as limited with the records per solution here from the standpoint of we can actually link to records in other solutions. So we can have a table that we take out of this solution, put in another solution, and link to it. So that can sometimes get people around that limitation if that works for your use case. Now, on the other side of the spectrum from the SMB side is the enterprise plan. And I think the part that we like best is that enterprise, it's really transparent in its pricing. Take a look here. You have to go, you contact sales, you go through the whole sales process in order to be able to purchase it, which is significantly more expensive. Here on Airtable, $45 for the business plan is going to be more expensive than Smartsuite's enterprise plan to begin with. So for those reasons, pricing for the first category is a 3 in favor of Smartsuite. Now let's talk about views. Views are the different ways that we can visualize our information inside of these applications. It started in Airtable with pretty much a grid view. You were looking at things like it was an Excel type spreadsheet, but we have lots of different views to be able to choose from. Now, there are many that are in common, relatively speaking, between Airtable and Smartsuite. So grids, calendars, Kanbans, galleries or cards, and timelines are going to be very, very similar between the two applications. Both Airtable and Smartsuite have forms. I'd give the slight edge to Airtable here, especially for more complex things like pre-filling forms. So we could have a form that actually fills in some of the data automatically in order for us to submit it. Smartsuite also has some unique features for their forms as well, including allowing for partial submissions. But overall, I'd say probably 70% of our projects actually involve a third-party tool called Fillout. Fillout is a forms provider that integrates amazingly well with both Airtable and Smartsuite. So this is honestly what we're using rather than the out-of-the-box forms. It's not bad to use the out-of-the-box forms, but oftentimes if you're doing more complex things, you're going to want to turn to a third-party application. Now, one view that Airtable has that Smartsuite does not is the list view. This is going to feel very similar to Notion if you've used that application before, and this gives us the ability to have different records, and we can actually nest records underneath. So for example, we could have some account information. We have our account record, and for that account, we have multiple projects, and for each project, we have tasks underneath that. So that's really helpful to help us organize our information. Now, Smartsuite has a designated map view, so you can geocode information and display it on a map. It's possible to do this within Airtable, but you're using extensions to be able to do it rather than an out-of-the-box view. Perhaps one of the most needed views that Airtable has that Smartsuite does not currently is that of a Gantt chart and being able to view our task dependencies that we have within a project. Now, I will say, cough, cough, if you check in the lower right-hand corner here, that Gantt charts are coming really soon. So I can't appropriately give it a rating for this to be able to say, oh, the Gantt views are awesome, because we're not at that point yet. But I would say that if that's something that's holding you back from Smartsuite, that's going to be rolling out very soon. Overall, views are very similar between the applications, but I would say Airtable has the edge, giving it a +1 for its list view and currently its Gantt capabilities. When it comes to field types, Smartsuite has a lot of different options. You can see if we scroll through these, there are fields for just about anything that you would want, especially when it comes to project management, and we'll talk about some of those in a moment. But let's say something like an address is particularly interesting. If I choose this field, we have a compound field, which means we have multiple values that can be part of that one field, as you'd imagine an address. Whereas in Airtable, we'd have to create separate fields for our street 1, street 2, our city, our state, and our zip code. Instead, if we have an address here, this can show up as one field, or we can format that differently. These field types also have a lot of functionality baked into them. So for an address, we actually have address validation. We can click on an address, it fills it out for us to save us some time. We press done, and now we've got that information available, and this can be used in that map view that we just spoke about. Another field type that's really unique to Smartsuite is the Smart Doc. This is essentially like a mini Notion doc that's available as a field type. So if we're taking meetings, we can have images, we can have checklists of items, we can use all sorts of rich formatting. And to be able to add to it, we can just use that / and be able to insert all of these different pieces here. We can use AI in it. And so this is a really nice experience when it comes to collaborating with your team. The only downside I think that comes from these additional field types is when it comes to integrations and how it's treated through the API, because not all fields are available, or sometimes the integrations don't support them very well because it's really unique field types. But by and large, when you're thinking about using these fields in the application, it's super helpful. Now, Airtable's approach to field types is a little bit different. There are still several different field types that you can choose from, but not quite as many options with all of the bells and whistles that you have inside of Smartsuite. However, I think Airtable takes a very tasteful approach to using more formatting options for a given field. So Smartsuite might create multiple fields that represent variations off of one another. In Airtable, you get a few more formatting options for that particular field. So I do like the way that we have different types of presets that we can do based on how we want to format a given output for that field. Overall, Smartsuite has the advantage. We give it a 2 when it comes to field types. When it comes to formulas, Airtable has an advantage when it comes to a few additional, more sophisticated functions that are available. But by and large, these two are getting closer and closer, and so I don't think that will have as much of a bearing. I like the fact that in Airtable, we can choose the formatting of the output of the values from our formula. In Smartsuite, I really wish that I could type and be able to tab or press enter. This is just a small usability thing. Instead, I'm going to click this, but what's great about Smartsuite's formulas is the ability to use dot notation to be able to find properties from linked records. So right now I'm on a task, and that task is linked to a project. Now, if we were in Airtable, we'd have to have some lookup fields, and we'd take those values if we want to concatenate them or divide them or do something to them. In Smartsuite, we can just say project, which is our linked record to that project, press a dot, and then now you have access to all of the linked fields that are coming from that linked project record. So I could say, hey, take the hourly rate, and then we could multiply this, and we could say by a number of hours. So this saves us from creating so many additional lookup fields. I rarely have to create that many lookup fields, and so I think it saves the database some extra clutter. And it's just really nice to be able to use as we're building out our formulas. All in all, that dot notation is a huge plus for Smartsuite, and so we rate that as a +2. Now, at this point, you might be saying, hey, this guy is giving Smartsuite a lot of good ratings here. Is he really that big on Airtable? And I am. I think in this video, I'm starting with kind of surface layer. So bear with us as we go through this, because I think you're really going to see Airtable shine when we get deeper into automations and building custom applications. So we'll keep moving through the categories. The next category here is huge because I think there's so many different ways you can interpret this. I'm broadly calling this project management. Smartsuite is more of kind of this work management collaboration platform background. And Airtable, I'd say, is a little bit more on the traditional project management side. And the two kind of meet in the middle. So we'll call this project management. The first thing that I'll talk about is subtasks. So in Smartsuite, when it comes to subtasks, we have a couple different ways of implementing it. One is through a checklist. There's another field type called sub-items. Now, our checklist is simpler. We can give a description, we can give a due date, and we can assign this to someone. And then in sub-items, we've got some more flexibility where we can add different fields to that so it can present that information contextually. I really wish that Smartsuite had the ability to view sub-items or subtasks underneath the parent object, similar to how Monday.com does it. Right now, we can see the percentage completion of our checklist here, and we can expand our checklist, but I'd prefer that we have the ability to look at all of those items nested. Now, Airtable, I don't know why, doesn't have a great solution for subtasks. People have been asking for it forever. I think the closest thing that we have to a pretty decent solution is to be able to use the list view, and we can nest different items underneath this, and we could have this be for other objects. Like in this case, I actually created a subtasks table, or we could have it be self-referential. And there's some pros and cons to each of those. Now, there are some workarounds. You can do some rich text formatting, and there's a few different other solutions. But by and large, I just wish there was a little bit more concrete way of implementing subtasks. A super awesome feature in Airtable is the ability to have record templates, and you can create multiple of these. So we can have a template, and we can fill in default form values. We can create related records from this. So imagine you have a project and you say, by default, every time I spin up this project, I want it to create these 10 tasks for that project. That's where this record template really comes in handy. And so we can just click the plus button down here and we can say, use that template that I have, and it spins it up for me. I don't have to build my own automations for it or anything like that. Instead, it just uses that template to create my project and all of the tasks. Now, Smartsuite, on the other hand, you could do a workaround. You could say, we're going to build an automation that when we create a new project of this type, now let's manually add all these tasks. But it's a pain if you have a lot of tasks. If I had 50 tasks for a project, it's going to be very cumbersome to do that in an automation. Now, when it comes to views, one of the things that I love about Airtable, and it's kind of hidden away, is within the timeline, we can actually create a utilization view itself. So we can track and see what percentage people are utilized. And this is really helpful for project management. Now, of course, we also have the Gantt view, and we mentioned before how that's coming out for Smartsuite, but we're not really going to consider that for the purposes of our evaluation, because Gantt views are working great right today in Airtable. One of the most powerful features in Smartsuite is called My Work. This is based on the idea that we might have multiple different solutions. In Airtable, we call them bases. In Smartsuite, we call them solutions. And it doesn't matter where these live, as long as it has a due date and an assignee and a task for that, then we can go ahead and see a unified view of our work. Now, we can access this anywhere in the application, so I can click on My Work. And so I can see I've got different upcoming tasks, and I can prioritize these differently. But I can see that even though this is coming from one solution where we're working on videos, and these are coming from project management, now I've got one spot where I can check off my tasks rather than having to navigate between different solutions or bases in Airtable's case. In Smartsuite, we have the ability to do time tracking with a special kind of time tracking log field. We can click on the plus button and add in our entries. And so this is able to track time entry multiple times for a given task or project. Smartsuite also has a communication center. Now, this is similar in many ways to inside of Airtable, where we can add comments. Both of them, we can @mention people on our team so we can see those comments. We can track our revision history in both. But inside of Smartsuite, you can also send out emails contextually about that record. And when someone responds to those emails, it gets logged as well. Now, we'd love to be able to send out from our own email addresses. There's just a standard one that it utilizes, but it's still helpful if you're using this for internal collaboration. Now, it's really hard to know how to rate this one. I'm putting it in the middle because there's some strong features on both sides. Some people swear by record templates, and there's no easy way to do that inside of Smartsuite. Other people really love the collaborative features that Smartsuite has around work management. I'm assuming that once we get Gantt charts inside of Smartsuite, that might nudge it in that direction. But for the purposes of this video, I'd say that one can really make an argument either way in terms of this overall project management category. Now, again, if we split this out and say traditional project management with your Gantt charts over here and being able to record template and things like that, I think Airtable comes out a little bit ahead. When it comes to a work management and collaboration platform, I think Smartsuite comes out ahead. In this next section, we're going to talk about interfaces and dashboards. And it's kind of funny. It's a little bit of an arms race. So Airtable here, we had our record layouts, and this was before interfaces, and it was really lacking. There's very little configuration we can do. We've got some fields that are hidden, but we can't really change this to display how we want it to. Now, Smartsuite really made a nice configurable experience for their record layout by being able to create different sections, and we can drag and drop all of our fields around. And so it's very configurable to how we want this to look. But then Airtable blew everything out of the water with its interfaces. And this, I think, is one of the strongest features for Airtable. And I'd say we build these on almost every single Airtable project that we do. Because the power of Airtable interfaces is that we can have different records and be able to create different complex layouts. We can have buttons that call automations or webhooks and do more complex logic with Make or Zapier. We've got different displays here of our activities. We can have reporting. We can have lists of data that we show. And I think one of the key aspects of these interfaces is that we can create a really configured experience for different roles within a company. So previously, before interfaces for Airtable, if you had a business process, what do? You've got grids and information, you can add records, but it didn't really have a nice flow to it. It's not like a custom application that you build for your team. But now we can build these different experiences. We can have an interface for our renewals for customer success, and then we can have one for our lead gen process for sales. Now, this video is far too long already, and so we dig into the nuances of building interfaces in some of our other videos. Smartsuite, on the other hand, has a view type of dashboards, and we can create dashboards a little bit different from interfaces. We can add different widgets to it, and there's a ton of different widgets that we can choose from. One of the strengths of Smartsuite is around reporting. So being able to have different comparison metrics and progress metrics, this is a leg up on what Airtable has to offer. There's also a really cool schema widget where we can outline the schema of our database tables. But by and large, these really are dashboards. They're great at reporting, but they're not awesome at creating those special, configured, tailored experiences for people on your team. So a sales manager would look at this to be able to do their reporting. But what if we wanted to say, hey, here's our sales process and our lead flow through this? You can kind of make it work, but the big feature that's missing is that this is not down to the record level. So here, if we go back into Airtable, you can see that we can choose from between our different accounts. And here we're showing this summary of all the information related to this bare POS solutions. We don't have those same capabilities when it comes to Smartsuite's dashboards. So overall, I would give a 3 to Airtable's interfaces here. We love dashboards in Smartsuite, but until they make that feature that we can have it for an individual record, it's lacking a lot of functionality compared to Airtable's interfaces. There's a lot of similarities when it comes to automations inside of both of these applications. We start with a trigger, and we have a lot of similar triggers between both of our applications. So we could say, hey, when a record is created, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we can create a record, update record, we can find records that we have, we can send an email, and we've got a number of integrations as well. This is similar in Airtable. We can add a trigger, and we can say when a record is created, and then we want to do some other steps here, including integrated steps and many of the same options that we have. But in Airtable, there are features that make automations simply more powerful. One is to have a repeating group. So in code, we talk about this as a loop. We'd say if we have this collection of items, for each of these, we want to run some kind of action. And that's huge in Airtable. This is a relatively newer feature that rolled out this year. We've got the ability to run scripts. And then now in beta, we have the Airtable's AI, the AI Assist, where we can actually have actions from our automations. Beyond the features side, I would say that automations are more performant inside of Airtable than they are in Smartsuite. Smartsuite's going to take a little bit longer to process. Sometimes you get some hiccups in there. It's nothing that's life-altering, but it's something that you should be aware of as you're building out your Smartsuite automations. One of the things I really appreciate about Smartsuite's automations is how they allow you to have more business logic in the automation itself. So for example, if we have a due date, we could say, hey, let's do today plus X amount of days to be able to create that for our task. In Airtable, we can't really do that. In order to have that kind of logic, we'd have to create a formula field, and then we'd assign the value to the value of the formula field, which means we're creating tons of extra formula fields. Overall, Airtable has the advantage here, so we're giving it a 2 for automations. Automations is a huge strength of Airtables, and Smartsuite is able to do a lot of the same functionality, but if you need some more of those advanced features, you're going to look to Airtable. When it comes to syncing, Smartsuite and Airtable have two radically different philosophies on this. In Airtable, this is truly what we would call syncing. We would say we have a base, and in that base we have a table, and that information we want to be able to access from other bases that we have. So in this case, if I have a CRM and we have accounts here, this is information that we want other people to be able to interact with, even if they are not directly inside of this CRM itself. So if I'm in customer support and I need to access information about those active customers, and I have cases that relate to those customers, you'll notice this lightning bolt icon, and these customers are being synced in from that other base, that table in that other base. And so we can open up a record, we can view all of the information, and then this is where it's interesting. Depending on what plan you're on is whether you have access to one-way or two-way sync. So one-way sync means you can view that information, but you can't actually edit that information. If you have two-way sync, you'll be able to interact with that data on either side. Now, Smartsuite's philosophy is very different. Instead of syncing the data, meaning we're keeping two copies of this data in sync together, you're actually just linking out to tables regardless of what solution they live in. So if I'm in this solution, I could go ahead and create a new linked record. And in that linked record, we could tell it, what table are we linking to? Now we see the ones that are part of this solution, but if we scroll down, we look at all the different solutions that we have and we can link to that table. So let's say I want to link to the projects from our projects demo solution that we have. We can go ahead and add that field, and now we can link to that record. We'll select it here. And when we have that information, we can click, we can open this up, but we can actually add our information, and this is just storing it in one spot in that other solution. It's not storing it in two locations and keeping it in sync together. Now, when we talk to our clients, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards this implementation. However, there are times where you'd say, oh, I'd really like to see a list of those projects here, and there's no way just to add, let's say, an area up here with the plus button, say, show me those projects, kind of like we have when we're looking at it in Airtable, and we have a list of our active customers. Overall, we're leaning towards Smartsuite with a 2 on this one, although we understand other people have different philosophies about how they want their data synced or managed across solutions. The other thing I'll mention here is that when it comes to integrations, it's up to the integration partners to understand how do sync tables work, how do linking records across solutions work between these. And so you can have some mixed results when it comes to those integrations. Now, when it comes to integrations, you're going to have a pretty good experience both with Airtable and Smartsuite. Both have connectors for Zapier and Make. Both have their own APIs that you can use for your own custom development. I would say that there are better options within the UI of interacting with webhooks. Now, this is a little bit more technical in nature, but this might be of interest to some of you. So within Airtable, you can actually have a trigger for an inbound webhook. So you could say, hey, call this webhook from a different application, and then use that information and process it inside of our automations. And the last thing I'll mention is just around the ecosystem. Airtable is huge. And because of that, there's tons of applications that say, hey, we want to build native integrations to Airtable. Now, some of these are a little bit niche, but I'd also say that the top level integrations that you're probably looking for, things like Softer to be able to build a client portal or fill out for forms, are going to be available for both of these applications. But in general, if someone asked me, hey, does this integrate with Airtable? Probably. Does it integrate with Smartsuite? Maybe not natively, although their integration ecosystem is growing as well. So overall, we'll give a +2 to Airtable for the integrations, both with the breadth of the ecosystem as well as webhook functionality. Now let's take this a step further when it comes to customization. So Airtable has the ability to have different extensions. They have a marketplace here. So if you're a developer, you can create your own extensions. We can also use Airtable scripting with JavaScript in the context of our automations, which is super powerful to be able to extend the functionality of Airtable. Now in Smartsuite, in our dashboards, we can actually run our own JavaScript if we want to. So a lot of people have been doing some pretty cool things with ChatGPT to be able to pull some code, inject it into their dashboards, which is something that we can't currently do in interfaces in Airtable. Overall, though, I think the scripting piece is really what's to the advantage of Airtable, so we're giving them a +2 for customizations. When it comes to permissions, in Airtable, we can add our collaborators, we can share this, we can invite people, and we can give them different permissions. We've got creator, editor, commenter, and read-only. Now, when it comes to a table level for permissions, we can click here and we can go to edit our table permissions. And we've got a little bit of functionality here. We can say who can edit projects, and we can say which level and up can do these things. And then same thing on the permissions level for our field level. We can go to edit field permissions. And so we can say who can edit the values of this field. In addition, we're starting to see some level of permissions in interfaces as well. But this really pales in comparison to what we can do with permissions inside of Smartsuite. So for one, we can add our team members to various teams. And so we don't have to worry about adding and removing individual members. Instead, we can do it as they're part of a team. We can say everyone who's on the marketing team gets access to this. That means if someone joins the company and you add them to the marketing team, they suddenly get access to everything that the marketing team does. You don't have to worry about manually onboarding that individual user. We also have additional functionality when it comes to our tables and our field level. So if I click on a table, I can go to permissions, and here we can go ahead and say, hey, let's assign this to our marketing team. Let's give them permissions. Do we want them to have full access? Or here's where we can change the different roles, and there's some additional options that we have. And then we can do the same thing down at the field level. So I can click on a field and edit those field permissions, and we can now say who can view this field and then who can edit it. This is really helpful. Oftentimes we might have sensitive information and we want to obscure that from everyone else. Now that's where interfaces come in handy in Airtable, because we don't have to have all of the data that people are looking at. Maybe they only access that data through an interface. But overall, you can get much more granular when it comes to permissions in Smartsuite. Permissions is core to Smartsuite, and so we give them a +3. We've talked a lot about the functionality, but it's important to talk about support. I'd say in general with Airtable, you're going to get an inconsistent level of support for most of the plans that they offer. In fact, if you try to contact support via chat, you're going to see a bot which is going to try to redirect you away from support. Smartsuite's philosophy on support is very different. They're using it to a strategic advantage to make sure that you understand how the system works. So you can log tickets if you encounter issues, and you can even message the team members directly. If support is important to you, especially at non-enterprise levels, then Smartsuite has the huge advantage here with a 3. Okay, let's do a recap of the features that we've seen and how we rated them. So on the left-hand side, we've got Airtable. Right-hand side, we've got Smartsuite. So Airtable, super strong for interfaces, automations, integrations, customizations. Views, we've got a slight advantage. Project management is in the middle, but leaning towards the right, especially when Gantt charts get introduced for Smartsuite. For Smartsuite, we've got field types, formulas, and syncing, which are advantages, and then really strong around permissions, pricing, and support. Now, I want to remind you that even though we helped you evaluate these features, it's important for you to determine which features are the most important based off of the needs of your business or organization. For some clients, permissions are everything, and they can't use an application without really strict rules governing how they use it. For others, you could care less about permissions because everyone's collaborating all together. Now, the last piece I'll leave you with here is which application is for me, and this is just some high-level guidance. So for Airtable, if you want to build custom applications, interfaces is where it's at. If you have really complex automations, you need highest performance of those automations and stability, and you want to be able to extend what Airtable has to offer, then this is a good solution for you. For Smartsuite, on the other hand, work management and collaboration are key. You can have tasks and manage them all across the system from one spot. You've got Smart Docs to be able to have your documents in one place. There's lots of great options when it comes to collaborating with a team. In general, you're going to find that Smartsuite's a little bit more affordable. There's better support. And in addition to that, you can actually submit feature requests that get responded to from the team. Smartsuite has a really aggressive roadmap. Airtable's more on the stability side. They've already built this application. You want that aggressive, here's coming out with lots of new features. You're probably looking more towards Smartsuite. Thanks for joining us on this journey as we compared Airtable and Smartsuite. Now, if you still have lingering questions, or you've now selected a platform and want to move forward in implementing it for your team, don't hesitate to reach out to us at automationhelpers.com, where we offer free 30-minute consultations.